Something massive just changed in this war. And if the reports out of Moscow are accurate, Ukraine has just punched through one of the last protective layers around the Russian capital and hit a radar node that was supposed to make Moscow harder to reach, harder to target, and harder to intimidate. Let me be precise about what happened here. This is not just another drone headline, and it is not just another loud night over the capital. This is about the degradation of a sensor layer inside Russia's most politically sensitive air defense architecture. My name is Colonel Adrian Thornwell. I commanded United States Army forces in Europe, and I have spent a career studying how modern militaries defend themselves, how they fail, and how pressure exposes the seams. Stay with me because by the time I am finished, you will understand why this matters far beyond one radar, one battery, or one blast site. Now let's talk about the mechanics. Moscow is not defended by a single shield. It is defended by a layered network. There are S-400 battalions. There are older S-300 systems. There are Panzer S-1-point defense systems. There are early warning and acquisition radars. And there is a command architecture designed to tie all of that together so the capital, the regime, and the strategic leadership remain protected. Depending on the sector, that can include systems like the 91N6E acquisition radar, the 96L6 all-height detector, the Gamma S1 family, Podlet K1 low-altitude sensors, and deeper strategic missile defense elements linked to the A135 complex and the Dawn-2N phased array radar. Think about what that means. This is a systems of systems defense. It only works if the sensors see. It only works if the command post fuses the picture correctly. And it only works if the launchers receive timely data and are not overwhelmed, blinded, spoofed, or forced to react too slowly. If Ukraine has struck or disabled one of those radar elements, the point is not simply the metal that burned. The point is that a radar is the eye of the defense. Remove the eye, and the launcher becomes slower. It becomes less confident. It becomes less effective. And let me explain why this is so significant. Russian air defense around Moscow is not just about military protection. It is about political theater. The Kremlin wants Russians to believe the capital is invulnerable. It wants elites to believe the center still commands the periphery. It wants the outside world to believe that Russia can absorb punishment and still shield its core. So when a strike package reaches into that ring and damages a radar that helps guard Moscow, the military effect matters, but the psychological effect may matter even more. If the strike used one-way attack drones, decoys, or a route designed to exploit gaps in coverage, that would be completely consistent with how Ukraine has been operating. Platforms such as the UJ-22 Airborne, the Beaver, and the AN-196 Lyuty have already shown that Ukraine can reach deep into Russian territory. Those systems are not glamorous. They are not expensive prestige weapons. But they are effective when they are used with patience, deception, and timing. That is how you make a modern air defense network work too hard. War is not fought on paper. It is fought through detection, reaction time, command discipline, and the ability to keep a network coherent when someone else is trying to tear it apart. If this was indeed a radar tied to Moscow's defense, then Ukraine has demonstrated something very uncomfortable for the Russians. Distance is no longer safety. The capital is no longer a sanctuary in the way the Kremlin wants it to be. And if Russia has to pull additional S-400 batteries, Panzer systems, and trained crews toward Moscow to patch the hole, that means fewer assets protecting the areas where the war is actually being fought. That means fewer systems for Kursk, fewer systems for Belgorod, fewer systems for Crimea, fewer systems covering the Black Sea coast, fewer systems supporting the logistics corridors that feed Russian operations in the south and east. Let me step back and give you the strategic picture as I see it right now. Every high-end air defense system Russia parks around Moscow is one less system available to protect ammunition depots, oil infrastructure, command posts, and military airfields closer to the front. Every interceptor missile launched against a low-cost drone is money spent to defend a political symbol rather than a battlefield position. A 40N6 or 48N6 class interceptor is not cheap. A Panzer engagement is not cheap, and the radar itself is not easy to replace. It is specialized equipment. It depends on electronics, precision manufacturing, and supply chains that have already been stressed by sanctions, import restrictions, and wartime consumption. This is why I keep saying that industrial war matters more than slogans. If Russia loses a radar layer, it does not simply lose a piece of hardware, it loses confidence. It loses reaction time. It loses a layer in the kill chain. And if it wants to replace that layer, it has to spend scarce resources, move trained personnel, and accept new vulnerabilities somewhere else. Russia can issue orders. It cannot issue spare semiconductor capacity out of thin air. Now widen the lens. If this strike is confirmed, it fits a broader Ukrainian strategy that is becoming impossible to ignore. Ukraine is not trying to win by matching Russian brutality against civilians. Russia continues to strike cities, apartments, power stations, and infrastructure to create fear and exhaustion. Ukraine, by contrast, is striking the machinery of war: radar, fuel, ammunition storage, logistics hubs, airfields, command and control, industrial nodes that keep the Russian military functioning. That is a very different strategy. Let me be precise about what that means in a long war. Capacity matters more than pain. Always. A country can absorb pain for a long time if its military capacity remains intact and its political leadership believes victory is still possible. But once the sensing, fueling, moving, and firing functions start to degrade, the whole machine slows down. And a slower military is a weaker military. A blinded military is a dangerous military, yes, but it is also a military that begins making mistakes. This is also where the economic layer comes in. Russia's war economy is under constant strain from refinery damage, fuel, market disruption, sanctions pressure, and the drain of replacing destroyed equipment. Every time a drone hits a refinery, a depot, a warehouse, or a logistics node, the Kremlin is forced to spend money on repairs, rerouting, and protection. Every time it diverts air defense to protect Moscow, it creates a gap somewhere else. Every time it burns through another round of imported microelectronics, it deepens its dependence on a black market ecosystem that is slower, more expensive, and less reliable than what a normal industrial power would enjoy. Think about what that means for the Russian state. It has to defend the capital, defend the war, and defend the narrative. That is a very expensive burden. And in an attritional war, expenses are not just budget lines, they are strategic decisions. They determine how many systems can be sustained, how many crews can be trained, how many interceptors can be fired, and how much risk the Kremlin is willing to accept elsewhere. Now, there is a geopolitical layer to this as well. If Moscow's defense ring is being challenged, the Kremlin has to answer not just to the military, but to the security services, the political elite, and the public. That creates friction. Commanders get blamed. Air defense officers get scrutinized. Systems get shuffled. Sometimes people get fired. Sometimes the truth gets buried. But the insecurity remains. And that insecurity travels outward. Tehran watches this. Pyongyang watches this. Beijing watches this. Everybody watching understands that Russia is still dangerous but not invulnerable. That matters for diplomacy too. It tells the United States, NATO, and Ukraine's partners that long-range pressure works when it is sustained. It tells the Russians that no amount of propaganda can fully erase the reality that their own capital has to be defended with scarce and expensive systems while their army bleeds farther west. And it tells Ukraine something equally important. The deeper you can strike, the more you can force Russia to spend on defense instead of offense. Let me be clear about the strategic asymmetry. Russia wants to terrorize the population into submission. Ukraine wants to degrade the system that enables Russia to keep making war. One side is striking for pain. The other is striking for effect. One side is trying to break morale in the civilian sphere. The other side is trying to reduce the enemy's ability to fight. That is why these deep strikes matter. That is why a radar hit outside Moscow resonates far beyond the blast radius. It tells us the war is not static. It tells us the Russian rear is not secure. And it tells us that the long game is starting to punish the side that thought distance alone would protect it. Stay with me, because this is the core lesson. In a long war of attrition, capacity matters more than pain. Always. The side that can see first, move first, and adapt first usually gains the advantage. When you start taking out the eyes, the ears, and the command relays of a military, you are not just destroying hardware. You are creating hesitation. Hesitation in war is deadly. It slows intercepts. It complicates decisions. It makes commanders overreact in some places and underreact in others. That is how networks fail. So if the last radar shield guarding Moscow has indeed been hit, even partially, then this is not a tactical footnote. It is an indicator of strategic reach. It means Ukraine can contest Russian depth. It means the Kremlin must protect its center while still fighting a grinding war on the front. It means Russia's air defense network is being forced to do two jobs at once: defend the capital and defend the war. That is a very expensive problem. And I want you to remember this. A capital's air defense is not just a military asset. It is a symbol of regime confidence. When that symbol takes a hit, the Kremlin has to choose between admitting vulnerability and hiding it. It almost always chooses to hide it. But hiding vulnerability does not remove it. It only delays the reckoning. The strategic picture is brutally simple. Ukraine is forcing Russia to spend scarce resources on defense, repair, and redistribution. Russia is trying to impose fear and exhaustion. Ukraine is trying to remove capability. And in that contest, the side that can keep adjusting, keep striking, and keep its industrial base functioning has the better long-term position. That is why this strike, if confirmed, matters so much. The world needs to stay focused on what is actually happening on this battlefield. Stay sharp. Stay informed. We will be back with more updates as this campaign continues to develop.